Yo, the Jet Kevin Knight is flying high going into the Redemption. He beats Darby Allin to retain his TNT champion. He breaks Kyle Fletcher's record and has the most defenses as a TNT champion. And then he ends the show standing over the bloody body of Kenny Omega. He is flying high heading into Redemption, but can he become Jet 2 belts come AEW Redemption? We're going to be talking about all that right now on the All Elite Dirt Sheet.
This is All Elite Dirt Sheet. Hey! Hey! Hey!
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the All Elite Dirt Sheet, your AEW Dynamite post show. Today, we're not only going to be talking about AEW Dynamite, but we're also going to be giving the predictions for the AEW Redemption pay-per-view going down this Sunday. AEW pay-per-view weekend is always such a fun weekend, and going into this show, I was like, all right, they didn't announce many matches for Redemption, but after Dynamite, bro, Redemption got a hell of a facelift. It is going to be a hell of a show. We're going to talk about it all today. You probably noticed that this is not in its regular Thursday time slot. It is a Friday. There has been a lot of things throwing monkey wrenches into the schedule, but we're going to be back at it again, not only for Redemption review on Monday, possibly Monday night, maybe Tuesday. There's been a lot of schedule changes, but this upcoming Wednesday, we'll be back at it with the regular time schedule for the All Elite Dirt Sheet. So thank you for bearing with us, and thank you so much for always supporting the All Elite Dirt Sheet. Thank you for always supporting me, Mike Dinero, with the rest of DeLorean and everything else I got going on. Thank you for always supporting my homie Tim King, who's always working hard, always banging. I love having him on, and I can't wait to have him back here on the All Elite Dirt Sheet. It's going to be so much fun. But we got a lot to talk about. We have a whole lot to talk about. Like I said, we're going to be talking about AEW Dynamite from this past Wednesday, and we'll be giving the predictions for the Redemption pay-per-view. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get into it right now. Pull up my notes. AEW Dynamite was live from Nashville, Tennessee. Music City hosting Dynamite. Was a really, really fun crowd. The crowd was hot. The venue looked very, very familiar to the venue that they were in last week from Boston. That little music theater that they had connected to Fenway Park. It looked like an identical arena, but really cool. I always love these small, intimate venues and these intimate settings for AEW Dynamite because it keeps the show hot. The crowd is always loud and electric, and this was no different. We start out by seeing Ospreay and Kenny Omega, who are prepping for their trio's main event tonight, because not only will Ospreay and Kenny Omega be teaming up tonight, but they will also be joined by Jon Moxley, the Continental Champion. If I'm not mistaken, this might be the very first time that Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega are on the same team ever since the dawn of AEW, the very first show in AEW's history, Double or Nothing 2019. Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega have been on a collision course against each other. Never have there ever been a moment where Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega are on the same team. So tonight makes that history. Kenny Omega, Will Ospreay, and Jon Moxley will be going against three members of Don Callis Family, Hechicero, Brian Cage, and Jake Doyle in the main event. It's going to be awesome. But we start out hot with a TNT Championship matchup. A matchup before last week I would have thought would have been at the pay-per-view. The Jet Kevin Knight defends as TNT champion against former three-time TNT champion himself, Darby Allin. This was a hell of a matchup, man. Before the matchup even starts, Darby Allin dives out to Kevin Knight. They brawl to the outside. Darby Allin hits a huge clothesline through the guardrail onto Kevin Knight. At one point, he has Kevin Knight on the timekeeper's table, and Darby Allin hits a big flying elbow from the top rope all the way to the outside onto the table. Table doesn't break, and sometimes when the table does not break, it hurts a whole lot more when the table does break. So that looked absolutely sick. All that action happened before the bell even rang. Once the bell rang, it was not any different, man. Balls to the wall action from both these guys. At one point, they fought back to the outside, and Kevin Knight catapulted Darby Allin onto the, well, he had him underneath the steel steps and catapults him up, and the top of the steel steps just goes flying off. Darby Allin is busted open from that. Really crazy spots. Kevin Knight hits a coast to coast, which when Kevin Knight does it, man, it's so effortless. He looks so good in there. Darby Allin put up a hell of a fight. He hit 2 code reds, one from the top rope that absolutely flipped Kevin Knight inside out. But after a UFO splash, Kevin Knight not only retains the TNT champion, big victory for Kevin Knight going into Redemption where he'll be facing Kenny Omega, but Kevin Knight not only beats a 3-time former TNT champion in Darby Allin, a former world champion in Darby Allin, but Kevin Knight breaks history with the most title defenses as a TNT champion in company history. That was held by former TNT champion, current international champion, and a teammate of Kevin Knight's and the Don Callis family, Kyle Fletcher, which leads to Kyle Fletcher coming out while Kevin Knight is celebrating. Then Okada comes out. Kevin Knight looks a little pissed off. It looks like the bigger members of the Don Callis family is upstaging Kevin Knight. We come back for commercial break, and we have the entire Don Callis family in the ring, along with Renee Paquette, and she's asking what is next for the Don Callis family, especially with a lot of big world title matches coming up at Redemption. First, before anybody gets to talking, we had Big Mark Davis, Dump Truck Davis grabs the mic, and he says that he's not even sure if he'll have an international title matchup against Andrade because Andrade is still stuck to the pavement where Mark Davis left him last week in Fenway Park. The Jet, Kevin Knight, he grabs the mic and he talks about breaking Kyle Fletcher's title defense record. Kyle Fletcher grabs the mic and he says that he hopes that the Jet, Kevin Knight, wins at Redemption. He hopes that the Jet could beat Kenny Omega and become Jet 2 belts. And he said, how about you do it without the Don Callis family? Show me that you could do it without the rest of the team. Just like he could beat Bandito without the rest of the team. And he wants to have every member of the Don Callis family banned from ringside come Sunday when he goes against Bandito. And to give a little preview of that, he wants every member of the Don Callis family banned from ringside right now when Brodito goes against Kyle Fletcher and Kazuchika Okada, which leads to our next matchup, a very fun matchup, an amazing tag team matchup between Okada and Fletcher, Proto Okada versus Brodito, the team of Brody King and Bandito. A lot of fun spots, man. This was just AEW doing what AEW does. They have 4 big names that they could just put anywhere on the card. You have Bandito, who is always being talked about as one of the best wrestlers today. Me and Tim always say that Bandito could be maybe top 1 or 2 best wrestlers in ring today. You have Okada, who's one of the best wrestlers of all time. You have Brody King, who's an absolute brute. And then you have Kyle Fletcher, who is only like 26 years old, has all the talent in the world, and is going to be a big, big player for AEW for the years to come. This was just a great matchup. But in the end, Brodito picks up a huge victory because we had Okada go for the Rainmaker onto Bandito. He ducks. Okada accidentally hits Kyle Fletcher, which leads to Brody King taking Okada out, and then Bandito hitting the 21-plex on Kyle Fletcher for the victory. So going into this matchup at Redemption between Bandito and Kyle Fletcher has been pinned by his opponent, Bandito, with Bandito's 21-plex. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens on Sunday. Bandito and Brodito goes into Sunday with all the momentum in the world. After the matchup, though, the Don Callis family, they make their way out. They attack Brodito. They surround the ring. And then out comes Andrade. So I guess Andrade was scraped off of the pavement in Fenway Park. And he comes out and makes the save. He evens the odds. And Brodito and Andrade stand tall as the Don Callis family retreats. Really, really good opening matchup that leads to another great matchup. I love when AEW does this, when they have one matchup bleed into the next matchup. It's amazing the way they've been doing this week in and week out. Really good 2 matches to start off this Dynamite. We next get a vignette for the Painmaker, Chris Jericho. We see highlights of Chris Jericho as the Painmaker taking on some pretty dastardly bumps when he was going against Nick Gage, when he was going against Eddie Kingston in that barbed wire match from like 2022. So it's going to be a very violent Chris Jericho versus Tommaso Ciampa in a no DQ matchup at Redemption. We'll definitely talk about that later when we give our predictions. We next get the hardcore legend Mick Foley, who comes out, and he's here to mediate a face-to-face between Tekla and Will Willow Nightingale. This was a very, very really cool segment. Gosh, all over the place today. Really fun segment. Always great to see Mick Foley. Always great to see the hardcore legend. And having Mick Foley there interacting with Tekla was fun, but having Mick Foley there interacting with Willow Nightingale was even funner because Willow Nightingale is, in my opinion, the embodiment of Mick Foley in a female form. Like, if you look at, first of all, they're both from Long Island, New York. Willow's attitude, her personality, it's very much what Mick Foley was in the WWE. You have this, never say die attitude. You could turn up the violence because we've seen Willow in some crazy ass matches against Chris Statlander within the Blood and Guts. Willow could be that positive, friendly wrestler, but she also could turn up that violence like Mick Foley could, obviously the hardcore legend. And Tekla here was basically saying that she doesn't believe the personality of Willow is real. She believes that Willow's putting up a front. She doesn't buy Willow's positivity, that just keeps smiling attitude. Willow says that Tekla walks around here like she's the biggest and the toughest, but it's because she feels so small. Mick Foley grabs the mic and he says that he sees a lot of himself in Willow and he thinks that Willow is the future here. But Tekla grabs the mic and cuts him off and says, "You need to shut up," which means Willow now cuts her off and says, "You do not disrespect a legend like Mick Foley." She says, I know you like to go around here and saying this, but right now you are acting like a dumb bitch. Tekla then slaps Willow and then hits her with the mic. Willow, this was on the ramp, by the way. Willow is then, in the ring. Tekla goes to attack Willow even more with her belt. And then Willow hits the pounce and she stands tall. This is going to be a very fun matchup at Redemption. I think that this was a good segment to set it up because we didn't see Tekla last week. Tekla was off in Japan with the Sisters of Sin, the Triangle of Madness, winning belts in Stardom. So really cool to see Willow and Tekla get that last-minute push for their matchup at Redemption. This is going to be a lot of fun. This is a matchup that very well could have been the women's title matchup at All In. Instead, we're getting it at Redemption. I don't see Willow winning, but we're going to talk about that later. This was a really good segment and great usage of Mick Foley. I like the way they've been using Mick Foley lately, just bringing him out here, having him do these spots. We saw it a couple weeks ago with Kyle Fletcher and the Don Callis family. So I like the usage of Mick Foley. Next up on the show, we have Switchblade Jay White versus Clark Connors. This was a very solid matchup. This felt a lot like one of those New Japan Strong matches from like 2023, 2024. Jay White and Clark Connors put on a really good matchup. Really good spots here. Good to see Jay White. I'm not a big fan of his new attire, to be honest. His pants look like he's wearing like pajama pants. I much rather the Jay White that's wearing the tights and looks like $1 million. But just great to see Jay White back on my TV, man. It's been so long since he's been back on TV having matches week in and week out. This is continuing the feud between the Bang Bang Gang and the Dogs. Jay White wins by countering Clark Connors' spear and choking him out. He catches him with a front face lock and then chokes him out. After the matchup, Jay White stands tall. We had David Finlay come out with the shillelagh and he attacks Jay White. Out comes the Bang Bang Gang to even the odds. We had David Finlay and Clark Connors retreat to the back. And after this, we'll talk about, more about Redemption. Like I said, we'll do the predictions. But it is then challenged by the Bang Bang Gang. A challenge is set out by Juice Robinson for a double dog collar matchup at Redemption. Juice Robinson, Jay White versus the Dogs, Clark Connors and David Finlay in the dog collar matchup. That's going to be a big matchup, as is the tag team title matchup, because we see Cope and Cage talking backstage, and then Cope and Cage are quickly attacked by Claudio and Pac of the Death Riders. It does seem like the Death Riders are not on the same page because you have Cope and Cage feuding with a heel Pac and Claudio, but we see a more babyface Jon Moxley. So it does seem like right now Claudio is controlling some of the Death Riders, and we have Jon Moxley doing his own thing. But Cope and Cage versus Claudio and Pac is going to be a phenomenal matchup at Redemption. Really, really good segment. We had a women's tag title matchup on the show. No DQ matchup. Another matchup that should have been at Redemption, if you ask me. The Sisters of Sin versus Divine Dominion. This was a hell of a matchup. First of all, we don't need one babyface team versus a heel team. Having two established teams going at it, that's all you need. We need more established teams going against Divine Dominion, and I'm just so glad to see Divine Dominion get a spot like this on Dynamite, not Collision. They've been saddled up for Collision for a long time now, but they get the spot here on Dynamite against the Sisters of Sin. Really fun matchup. Yeah, man, this is two of my favorite tag teams in women's wrestling right now. I love Divine Dominion. Sisters of Sin, I am a big fan of. I really like Julia Hart. I really like Sky Blue. I've been saying that week in and week out. So this was really cool to see. Sky Blue is busted open pretty quickly in this matchup. I think Sky Blue likes to bleed. You know, every time Sky Blue is in one of these hardcore matches, she's always bloodied up. I think she likes to bleed. Pretty quickly on, we had the Sisters of Sin take the fight to the Divine Dominion with kendo sticks, a table set up to the outside. Eventually, Megan Bain slams Sky Blue through that table in a devastating spot. End of the story. Divine Dominion is still the tag team champions. They're still absolutely ruthless in the ring. And right now, we're on a collision course for Divine Dominion and possibly the Brawling Birds at All In. But another big victory against another big victory for Divine Dominion going against the Sisters of Sin. Where does this leave the Sisters of Sin, though? Because, I mean, week in and week out, we see Julia Hart and we see Sky Blue getting beat. The only one of the Triangles of Madness that's actually doing anything of relevancy right now is Tekla. And we also have Divine Dominion now with this partnership with Mercedes Moné. A lot of interesting things going into Redemption and going into All In, but a very big victory for Divine Dominion. Next up, we have the Trios main event. Running through this Dynamite right now. We have the Trios main event. Kenny Omega, Will Ospreay, and Jon Moxley versus Brian Cage, Jake Doyle, and Hechicero. Very, very, very fun matchup. Really cool to see Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley mix it up in there as a tag team. Like I said, this is the first time that they ever were on the same page as a team. Will Ospreay looks like $1 million in there. I love the double teams of the Death Rider into the Hidden Blade, and then also Will Ospreay hitting the Hidden Blade, and you had Kenny Omega hitting the V-Trigger at the same time on Hechicero. This was just a fun brawl to end the show. And afterwards, after this matchup is where the real drama happens, because it looks like Kenny Omega wants to make peace with Jon Moxley. He's like, all right, we've had our past. We don't need to be doing all this. Like, let's just make our peace. We're both friends with Will Ospreay. So let's just, be peaceful here. And Kenny Omega looks like he wants to shake Jon Moxley's hand. Jon Moxley is not with it. He does not want to shake Kenny Omega's hand, which leads to a face-to-face. They start getting, all into each other's face. Will Ospreay tries to break it up. And Kenny Omega pushes Will Ospreay out the way, which leads to Will Ospreay then going face-to-face and trying to fight Kenny Omega, which leads to the Young Bucks coming out. The Young Bucks start to brawl with Jon Moxley and Will Ospreay because that's going to be their matchup at Redemption. And then the rest of the Don Callis family comes out. We have Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega brawling with Roppongi Vice. Kenny Omega looks to go hit a V-Trigger on both Trent Beretta and on Rocky Romero. And out of nowhere, Randy Orton would be proud of this. Out of nowhere, right before he hits that V-Trigger, comes flying Kevin Knight with the belt, nailing Kenny Omega with the title. Kenny Omega split wide open. He is bleeding a lot here. And the show goes off the air with Jet 2 belts. What could it be? What would it look like for Jet to win both the world title and hold the TNT title at the same time? Kevin Knight holds the world title and the TNT title. He puts the title in Kenny Omega's face. Omega's bleeding, leading to their matchup at Redemption. This was a fun way to set the table for Redemption. This whole show not only set up more matches for Redemption, but has me a lot more excited going into Redemption. Really fun show. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. AEW has been doing a lot better with their go-home shows. This was a fun little episode, and it, like I said, set the table perfectly for Redemption. 4 out of 5 stars. But with that out of the way, let's talk about AEW Redemption going down this Sunday, live from Canada. Let's pull up the card right here. Going down from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, the Bell Center. We have 10 matches announced so far. We still have Collision going down on Saturday, so there is the possibility of more matches being added to this show. But right now we have 10 matches. I think that's more than enough. more than enough, but there's probably going to be like 1 or 2 buy-in matches that are added. As of right now, these 10 matches are absolutely stacked. This is a very stacked pay-per-view. So let's get into it right now in the order that is on AEW's website. It may not be the order of the show, but we're going to talk about it in this order right here. Let's start out with the Bang Bang Gang, Jay White and Juice Robinson versus the Dogs, David Finlay and Clark Connors in a double chain tag match. Now, I got to give a big shout out to Tim King because TK told me, he said right here on the All Elite Dirt Sheet, he could see Juice Robinson as a dog. Does it happen here? Does it happen here? I don't know. I don't know if that happens here, but I too could see Juice Robinson as a dog. He would fit right in with David Finlay and Clark Connors. Remember, Juice Robinson and David Finlay have a lot of history. FinJuice was a big tag team in New Japan Pro Wrestling. But the one person that we have not talked about here is Gabe Kidd. If they could get the visa issues fixed, Gabe Kidd is cleared. He's ready to go. I could see Gabe Kidd playing a factor in this matchup, and I could see David Finlay and Clark Connors beating Jay White and Juice Robinson in this matchup. It's going to be a phenomenal matchup. It's going to be violent as hell. The AEW has a history of very violent dog collar matches. We've seen the matchup. Well, it's a double chain matchup, but I think that it's going to be just as violent as these dog collar matches. Like the MJF versus CM Punk one. We had the Briscoe brothers versus FTR. Should be a lot of fun. We have a 6-way ladder matchup to determine the number 1 contender for the AEW International Champion. Right now, it is going to be Jack Perry, the Beast Mortos, Commander, Speedball Mike Bailey, Nick Wayne, and El Clone in a 6-way ladder match. This should be a whole lot of fun. I think that it is a must for Speedball Mike Bailey to win this matchup. And I'll tell you why. We've seen Speedball have classics against Kyle Fletcher. Do I think Kyle Fletcher will win if he goes against Speedball? Yes, I do think. But they have classics. But it will further the story with Mike Bailey feuding with Kyle Fletcher. And then behind the scenes, you still have Kevin Knight feuding with Kyle Fletcher. I think that this could lead somewhat to a very interesting dynamic with 2 guys who no longer like each other, like Kevin Knight and Mike Bailey, but having a common enemy in Kyle Fletcher. I think that that's the way to go. This should be a lot of fun, though. Speedball seems absolutely directionless ever since his loss to Kevin Knight. And after the team of Jet Speed breaking up, we need something for Speedball. I say let Speedball win this matchup against these 5 other competitors in the 6-way ladder match. It's going to be a lot of fun. For the TBS champion, we have Hikaru Shida versus Maya World. Dude, this is going to be great. Maya World should win this matchup. Maya World became an absolute star at Forbidden Door. Maya World should win this matchup and keep that momentum high. I like Hikaru Shida, don't get me wrong, but does Hikaru Shida need to be TBS champion right now? I do not think so. Maya World, I can understand why she loses to Mercedes Moné. I would not understand why she loses to Hikaru Shida. Maya World needs to win this title and keep that momentum strong. Hell, have a rematch at fucking All In. I don't care, but Maya World needs this champion. Tag team matchup. We have the Death Riders, Jon Moxley and Will Ospreay versus the Young Bucks. This was a matchup that was signed last week. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be a good matchup. The Young Bucks got to lose, I would say, right? I mean, unless there's something that they're going to play into with Jon Moxley and Will Ospreay, the Young Bucks got to lose because Will Ospreay is the number 1 contender going to All In. Jon Moxley is the Continental Champion. The Young Bucks got to lose, but then if the Young Bucks lose, how do we build to the Young Bucks getting a title matchup like we're predicting at All In against Cope and Cage if Cope and Cage defend their titles successfully against the Death Riders? So this is hard. This is hard, but I think that Will Ospreay has to keep that momentum strong. Jon Moxley has to keep his momentum strong. I see the Young Bucks losing. I see Jon Moxley and Will Ospreay getting the victory here. But what this means for the Young Bucks for All In and how do you keep them strong going into All In if they do get a title shot? I don't know. I just don't think that it would be beneficial to Will Ospreay or Jon Moxley if they lose to the Young Bucks here with nothing on the line, especially going into the biggest pay-per-view a month later. So, very interesting matchup. I think that Will Ospreay and Jon Moxley will walk out as the winners in this matchup. For the AEW tag team titles, we just talked about it. It is going to be Pac and Claudio. Yo, TK again. TK said, Tony Khan has been listening to this show. Tim King said that Claudio and Pac is his dream team for the Death Riders, and Claudio and Pac get a tag title shot here. This is exactly what we've been calling. So shout out to Tony Khan if you're listening. You're very much, we appreciate you listening. And honestly, I think that this is awesome. TK been wanting to see Claudio and Pac as a team. They're going against Cope and Cage here. Will they win? Absolutely not. I think Cope and Cage are going to continue to win. They're in Canada. They should continue to hold on to these tag team titles until All In. I think that it should be a lot of fun, but Cope and Cage will win this matchup. Kyle Fletcher versus Bandito is going to be a fucking banger, bro. That's going to be a hell of a matchup for the AEW International Champion. Should be a whole lot of fun. Kyle Fletcher in no way loses to Bandito. And I think that this is where, I have been saying it every fucking month, but I think this is where Brody King pulls the trigger. Why is it that every time, every single month, Bandito gets this title shot, Brody King does not? And why is it that Bandito always loses these title shots? If I'm Brody King, I'm going to be a little pissed off, because last month it could have been Brody to get that Continental title shot against Moxley, but it was Bandito. This month, it could be Brody to go against Kyle Fletcher, but it is Bandito. And I could see Bandito losing this matchup, which could lead to Brody King to be like, look, you are squandering your title opportunities that should have gone to me. Should be a lot of fun to see what happens. That's just a prediction. But what I know is going to happen is Kyle Fletcher beats Bandito. Collision course all the way to All In. Possibly a triple threat against Takeshita and Okada. This should be match of the night. I have no doubt it's going to be a lot of fun. For the national champion, we have Mark Davis versus Andrade El Idolo. It is about time that we put a title on Andrade El Idolo. We've been talking about this man for the last couple of months. He is the best he's ever looked. Andrade versus Davis should be fun. It's not going to hurt Mark Davis anymore to lose the national champion to Andrade. Andrade needs a title. Mark Davis is amazing. He's been killing it, but does he necessarily need a title right now? No. Andrade does. Andrade beats Mark Davis for the national champion. For the AEW Women's Champion, Tekla versus Willow, I think 100% we're getting Tekla versus Mercedes. I don't want to see Willow versus Mercedes again. So with that being said, it's going to be a great matchup. Tekla's walking out still your AEW Women's Champion to go against Mercedes at All In. We have the no-holds-barred matchup, no DQ, the Painmaker Chris Jericho versus Tommaso Ciampa. I could see Chris Jericho win this. I want Tommaso Ciampa to win and continue to look strong. I was not opposed to Jericho taking some time off after Beach Break when Ciampa beat Jericho and then having the rematch, maybe even having this matchup at All In. I could see Jericho winning this matchup, and then we get the rubber match at All In. Maybe a cage match or something between Tommaso Ciampa and Jericho. The feud ender has to be Tommaso Ciampa winning. But I don't think this is the feud ender. I think this is the feud continuing. We're going to give Jericho his win back, make him one-on-one as they go into All In. Jericho wins this matchup, but he should lose to Tommaso Ciampa at All In if that's the route that they're going. Jericho, the Painmaker. It's going to be a very violent matchup, I'm sure. He's going to beat Tommaso Ciampa in this matchup. That all leads me with the main event. Kevin Knight, the Jet, the TNT champion, going against the world champion, Kenny Omega. The only title that's on the line is the world champion. So Kevin Knight loses the TNT title safe on his shoulder. But in no way, shape, or form do I see Kenny Omega losing this matchup. In no way, shape, or form. We are building towards Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay. Kevin Knight is going to be a fun pit stop. Who knows? There's been a lot of shit talk between Kevin Knight and Kyle Fletcher. Maybe we don't get Okada, Fletcher, and Takeshita in a three-way. Maybe we throw Kevin Knight in there too and we get a four-way, because I could see Kyle Fletcher stopping Kevin Knight from cheating to win this matchup. But then again, somebody who's not being talked about since Beach Break, the former world champion, MJF. Does MJF play a role in this matchup? That's interesting. Because as much as we talked about a triple threat for the international champion, we also said that there could be a triple threat for the world champion with MJF possibly making his way into that matchup and making it MJF versus Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay. But now there's also this whole factor of Jon Moxley. What role does Jon Moxley play? Does Jon Moxley continue to want to fight Kenny Omega? And does Jon Moxley play a role in this Omega Will Ospreay matchup too? I don't know, but either way, I think that Kenny Omega walks out of Redemption in Canada, still your AEW World Champion, because I cannot see it being Kevin Knight versus Will Ospreay in the biggest show of the year. Maybe one day. Kevin Knight is a very big star. He's got a bright future. Right now, it's got to be Will Ospreay versus Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega walks out still your world champion. Should be a fun show. Like I said, scheduling-wise, things have been crazy. So maybe, possibly, might do the review Monday night, but most likely it's looking like it's going to be Tuesday afternoon for the Redemption review. And then after that, Dynamite, we're going to be back to business. Scheduling is going to be fine. We're going to be back on track. But as of right now, there might be a little bit of a schedule change for the Redemption review. Might be Tuesday, maybe Monday, but I'll keep you all updated. But I just want to say thank you so much for all the support. Thank you so much for everybody who rides with the All Elite Dirt Sheet, who likes the videos, who are subscribed to the YouTube channel, who are following on TikTok at All Elite Dirt Sheet, who are following on this day AEW. We appreciate you all. Thank you so much for always supporting the All Elite Dirt Sheet. And we'll be back next week, not only for a review of Redemption, but for the AEW Dynamite review. So until then, I love you all. Enjoy Redemption going down this Sunday. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'll love to catch you back here next week to talk all about it. So I hope you hit that subscribe button, and I will see you then for a new episode of the All Elite Dirt Sheet. Peace out, y'all.
Hey!